As President Trump appears to be cratering in the polls, both nationwide and in almost every critical battleground state, actually pretty much every critical battleground state, even some of his strongest Fox News allies are now melting down about his electoral prospects. Here's Steve Hilton over on Fox News. Let's take a listen.
Guess who wants to give Fauci even more power? That's right, Joe Biden. With typically humiliating and craven pandering to his media cheerleaders, Biden confirms he'll make everything even worse. With Biden and the Democrats, there'd be even more bogus bureaucracy and shut down stupidity. And that terrifying prospect gets closer every day because of the baffling complacency of the Trump campaign. Where's the energy? Where are the ideas? Where's the hope for the future? 2 weeks ago, we were promised exciting policy announcements in the next 2 weeks. We're still waiting.
And he's referring there, Rachel, to President Trump said he was going to use the DACA decision and come out with a brand new health care plan. Of course, we haven't heard anything on that. And what's interesting to me here is Steve Hilton obviously has a very different of how we should be handling coronavirus than I do. Very different opinion of Dr. Fauci, although we have criticized him here, too, for his early comments on masks not being ineffective in particular. But even someone who is in a very different place from where I am, very different place from where Sagar has been, he still is looking at the polls and looking at the utter lack of leadership. Like, whatever direction you want him to go, the total absence of the president of the United States from the conversation and saying, like, what is going on here? You are making a total mess and disaster of this whole thing.
I do think that he's reflecting some of the frustration that is legitimate among Trump's base, which is that, you know, the campaign in particular just seems to be doubling down on this weird message of, again, there's a Marxist around every corner, vote for Trump.
Right.
And it's so far flung from what brought Trump into office that I think it's actually concerning people to the extent that, like, look, the reason that Trump, got this populist base together was because he got blue-collar Democrats together with blue-collar Republicans on a lot of these working class issues. And it's not that in some ways he's stopped addressing them, but he has two really big things, for instance, that he could be talking about. The H-1B executive order, some of the work he's done on that to protect American workers, but also this executive order that came out a couple of months ago on big tech is starting to be implemented as of yesterday, which really has the possibility to change the financial model of big tech in this country. That's a huge, huge thing he could be talking about. And so he's just not talking about the things that he's doing, which are good, and it's confusing.
But see, I disagree with that, though, because even if he was, he'd signed the executive order, whatever, I don't think anyone cares because they want to live. They don't want their kid to be able to go to school. They want to be able to make their rent payments. They want to be able to make their mortgage payments. And they also, look, there has been this national awakening on race that he has put himself very much on the wrong side of. So he's made everything worse in that regard. And so it's not going to work to say, oh, you should look over here at the H-1B or you should look over here at big tech. You can't change the channel on this stuff. The American people have decided what issues they care about, and he's essentially absented himself from the conversation. He's not even involved in these negotiations anymore. He's all over the map in terms of the economic response with what he wants. He says one day he's like, I want the eviction moratorium, but there doesn't seem to be any concerted push to get that. He said that he wanted the payroll tax cut, then that kind of fell to the wayside. Now he's back on the payroll tax cut. Like, it's all over the map. Totally absent any ideas, any leadership, et cetera, on what is going to be the defining issue of this election. And so, look, what I would want President Trump to do is very different from what Steve Hilton would want President Trump to do. But right now, what was interesting, he's basically satisfying absolutely no one because he's absent and completely abdicated leadership on what is the most critical issue of the day.
I think it's a fair criticism that there's no coherent response for this current crisis. I mean, all over the map, I think, is a gentle way of saying what's been going on.
Yeah.
But, I think that's true of the Republican Party generally. Like, nobody in Congress seems to have a clue what's going on. And I think the White House is scrambling a little bit. We do need to see, I think, more firm leadership. I think you see the president sort of flail in that direction when he sort of sends, DHS out to Portland, right? Because he's trying to look strong there. But it's like, no, what we really need is a steady, firm hand to sort of get the economic response together of what we're doing. So I think it's a fair criticism, and I think it's an unprecedented crisis that we're living through.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to look back on this and be able to parse exactly what was hopefully going on, but we can't right now.
Yeah. Well, and in the meantime, look, he's running against an opponent who is not all that impressive in Joe Biden, not doing all that much. Doesn't matter. He's adding staff now. Joe Biden in the state of Texas believes the state to be in play, has put up some ad buys, although the dollar amounts are not that huge right now. But he's investing in the state of Texas. This should not be on the table for Democrats. And yet, it's not crazy. If you throw up the Real Clear Politics average right now, it's basically a jump ball. Trump in the average of polls leads by 0.2%. And you can see there in the most recent polls, it's Biden +1, Trump +1, Biden +5, Trump +4. So very, very close race there. Now, ultimately, I think you would have to say Texas will probably return to its roots. It will probably go Republican. I would not, if I was advising them, recommend investing a lot in this state, because why not focus on the states that you really actually need to be able to win? But Democrats always dream of winning Texas, because at the Electoral College level, if you've got California, New York, and Texas in the bag, it's pretty much game over in terms of the presidential race. But I think this is just a sign of how confident they're feeling and how they are expanding the map, while the Trump campaign seems to have given up on key states like Michigan.
Yeah, I think seeing Biden invest in Texas while Trump campaign's giving up on Michigan gives me heart palpitations, because it's just not a good sign. But I think for the Republicans, it's like you can't take, the flip side of Biden going into Texas is, to Republicans, you can't take that state for granted.
Yeah.
States change. Demographics change. California used to be red a long time ago.
Yeah.
Right? Texas can go blue, and I think, there's been a lot of efforts to make it in that direction. I do like watching Democrats burn their money in Texas sometimes. We saw this a little bit with Beto O'Rourke and all of the money that flew into Texas for him.
The Democrats get really excited about Texas.
Yeah, and I get it, but I do think it's a wake-up call for the Trump campaign.
Yeah, I think that's right. And yeah, from a strategic perspective, some of the states that they're going into, should you be spending a lot of resources in Georgia? Should you be spending a lot of resources in Texas? Probably not the smartest move, but yeah, Republicans can't take it for granted. One thing that we were talking about in the break is the fact that the Biden Latino strategy, the one place where he really has been flat or even lost ground from where Hillary Clinton was last time around, is among Latino voters. And there was a real assumption, a real level of arrogance around Democrats that they didn't really have to do anything, that President Trump's rhetoric on immigration was enough to move Latinos in their direction significantly. We just haven't seen that. And obviously in Texas, it's a key demographic in terms of Democrats being able to actually pull off a win in that state. And from talking to Chuck Rocha here, who was Bernie Sanders, key to his success in the Latino community in the Democratic primary, it doesn't seem like the Biden campaign has really aggressively gone out and tried to win over that demographic. Partly it may just be confidence that they're doing so well with seniors, they're doing so well with white suburban voters that they don't really need to. But if you actually want to put Texas in play, you absolutely have to.
Yeah, I've mentioned it, I think, on your show before, but there is a tendency, I think, from these established parties to just make a lot of assumptions about, racial groups and how to talk to them. And I think the Sanders campaign and Chuck's work there really broke through that and was able to display a measure of authenticity to sort of meet a lot of Hispanic voters where they were at, which isn't always, where the parties assume they are. And so I think that's, that could hurt Joe Biden in Texas, especially with that demographic, because it's a big one in Texas.
Yeah, it was a real economic pitch from the Sanders campaign, especially on the issue of healthcare, but on other issues as well. So we will wait and see. It would be pretty interesting if Texas moved over, and if the president continues to bungle the handling of COVID. It is decidedly a possibility. All right, more Rising for you after this.